Hello, welcome to the Medical Licentiate Emerson channel. So today we are going to go through another human anatomy and physiology lecture. So we are going to talk about epithelial tissue. Okay, so we have to know that in terms of this definition, a tissue is an aggregate of cells and extracellular matrix organized to function in a collective manner. Okay, and then there are about four basic types of tissue. Four basic types of tissue, then and as well as the function. Then the epithelium, of course, the basic function is covering. Then the connective tissue, the basic function is support. Then the muscle tissue, its basic function is movement. Then the nervous system, its basic function is control. Okay. Then there are what we call cell junctions, and which occur in between the epithelial and in between the epithelial tissues, and they are about cell junctions. There are about 3 cell junctions that we need to talk about. Okay, so the first junction is known as the zonular occludens, which is known as a tight junction, which seal the space between epithelial cells so that no iron or water can flow between them. Then we have the zonular adherents, which physically bind the cells together in a zone near the apical pore. Then we have the other zone, which is macular adherents, which is desmosomes, which physically bind the cells together in a smaller areas resembling spots, anchoring junction as well as filaments anchor to the opposite side. Then the last junction is known as the gap junction or nexus, which connects cells together via protein-lined channels that provide a means of communication by permitting ions to flow from one cell to another. Okay, so this was what we are talking about. Talked about the tight junction, the desmosomes, and the gap junctions. These are the type of cell junctions. Okay, so this is also another illustration. Okay, so let's move on. You can pause and even go through. Okay, so for the cell junctions, we are done now. We can now go into details on the epithelial tissue. So epithelial tissue, the epithelium is a sheet of cells that covers the body surface or lines a body cavity. Also form most of the body's glands. Of the epithelial cells also form special nerves and end structures that are sensory. Then in terms of functions, of course covering and lining and protecting surfaces such as the epidermis. Then for absorption, of course in the intestinal lining. Then secretion, for example the parenchymal cells of glands. Okay, then special characteristics of epithelium, of course there is cellularity, and where the cells are packed tightly together with very little extracellular material. Then cells are joined by special junctions, the one we are talking about. Then in terms of polarity, the apical surface facing a space, and the basal surface contacting the connective tissue, and the lateral surfaces as well. That's in terms of polarity. Then they are vesicular. They are vesicular but innervated. So they don't have any blood supply, but they have innervation. So they receive nutrients from underlying connective tissue where capillaries lie. Then in terms of regeneration, the lost cells are quickly replaced by mitosis. Okay, so in terms of classification of epithelium, we can classify it according to the arrangement of cells in layers. So you can say it's simple when there's one layer cell, or stratified when there are 2 or more layers of cells. Then there is what we call pseudo-stratified epithelium. So pseudo means false, so which appears to have multiple layers of cells because the cell nuclei lie at different levels and not all cells reach the apical surfaces. That's according to the arrangement of cells in layers. Then the other classification is according to cell shapes, where we have squamous, which are thin cells. We have cuboidal, whose cell width and thickness is roughly similar. And then we have columnar, who are taller than they are wide. Then we have transitional cells that change shape from flat to cuboidal and back. So as organs such as the urinary bladder stretch, distend to a large size, and then collapse to a smaller size. That's an example. Okay, so that's in terms the classification in terms of arrangement of layers, where we have the simple, pseudostratified, stratified. Okay, then we have according to the shell shape, the squamous, the cuboidal, and the columnar. Okay, that's another example or another illustration of the epithelium. Okay, this is for the squamous, cuboidal, columnar. Okay, then if you combine the two characteristics, meaning the arrangement of cells and cell shapes, the types of covering and lining of epithelium is going to come out as follows. So in terms of a simple columnar, we can have in terms of a simple epithelium, we can have a simple squamous epithelium, we can have a simple cuboidal epithelium, we can have a simple columnar epithelium, non-ciliated and ciliated. You can also have a pseudostratified columnar epithelium, non-ciliated and of course ciliated. Then when we go to the stratified epithelium, an example we can have is the stratified squamous epithelium, which may be keratinized or non-keratinized. Then we have stratified cuboidal epithelium, we can have stratified columnar epithelium, we can have transitional epithelium. Okay. Then now we go into details on simple epithelium. Okay, so for simple epithelium, we can have a simple squamous epithelium, whose description is that it is a single layer of flat cells, centrally located nucleus. And in terms of location, it lines the heart, blood vessels, lymphatic vessels, air sacs of lungs, glomerular, which is the Bowman's capsule of the kidneys, and inner surface of the tympanic membrane of the eardrum, and forms epithelial layers or epithelial layer of serous membranes such as the peritoneum, pericardium, and the pleura. Okay, then the function of the simple squamous epithelium is of course filtration, diffusion, osmosis, secretion in serous membranes. Okay, this is more of an illustration of the simple squamous epithelium. Okay, then for the simple cuboidal epithelium, this description is that these are single layer of single layer of cube-shaped cells, centrally located with centrally located nucleus. Then location where they are found, they cover surface of the ovary, lines anterior surface of cups of the lens of the eye, forms the pigmented epithelium at the posterior surface of the eye, and lines kidney tubules and smaller ducts of many glands. And they makes up the secreting portion of some glands, glands such as the thyroid gland, and the ducts of some glands such as the pancreas. The function of the simple cuboidal is secretion and absorption. Okay, this is the simple cuboidal and how they look. An example would be the intralobular duct of the pancreas. Okay, then for the non-ciliated simple columnar epithelium, the description is that there is a single layer of non-ciliated columnar-like cells with nuclei near base of cells, contains goblet cells and cells with microvilli in some locations. And the location we are talking about, the lines the gastrointestinal tract, so from the stomach to the anus, and the ducts of many glands, and of course the gallbladder. Then function is secretion and absorption. That's the non-ciliated simple columnar epithelium. Then this is how they look like. They don't have cilia on top. Okay, these are non-ciliated. Then for the ciliated simple columnar epithelium, there is a single layer of ciliated columnar-like cells with nuclei near base and contains goblet cells in some locations. So the locations it lines some bronchioles, which are small tubes of the respiratory tract, even the uterine tubes or the fallopian tubes, and of course the uterus, the efferent ducts of the testis, some paranasal sinuses, central canal or spinal cord, and ventricles of the brain. Okay. Then function, they moves the mucus and other substances by ciliary action. Then this is how the ciliated simple columnar epithelium look like. They have cilia on top, as you can see. Then for the pseudostratified columnar epithelium, there is a non-true stratified tissue. They have a nuclei of cells that are at different levels, and all cells that are attached to basement membrane, but not all reach the apical surface. Then location, these are of course pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium that lines the airways of most of upper respiratory tract. Then for the pseudostratified non-ciliated columnar epithelium lines the larger ducts of many glands. So we have the epidermis and parts of the male urethra. Then function. So the function is for secretion and movement of mucus by ciliated action. Then this is a pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. Okay, the illustration. Okay, then we are done with the simple epithelium. We can now go to the stratified epithelium. So for the stratified epithelium, we have the stratified squamous epithelium, whose description is that these are several layers of cells, cuboidal to columnar shape in deeper layers. Squamous cells forms the apical layer, and several layers deep to it. These are cells from the basal layer, which replace surface cells as they are lost. Okay, so they move like from way down, from the deeper tissues going to the surface layer. So as they are lost, they move up. Okay, they go to the base. Okay, then the locations, we can have keratinized variety. These are keratinized. We have non-keratinized and keratinized one. So for the ones which are keratinized, they form the superficial layer of the skin. Then the one which are non-keratinized, they line wet surfaces such as the lining of the mouth, esophagus, part of larynx, part of pharynx, vagina, and covers the tongue as well. Okay, then function is protection. Okay, then this is a illustration of to show you how the flattened squamous cell at the apical and the stratified squamous epithelium will look like. And this is an example of the vagina stratified squamous epithelium. Okay. Then we have stratified cuboidal epithelium, where we have two or more layers of cells in which the cells in the apical layer are cube-shaped, and the location is that they can be found in the ducts of adult sweat glands and the esophageal glands and part of the male urethra. Then the function is protection and limited secretion and absorption. Then this is the illustration for stratified cuboidal epithelium. Then for the stratified columnar epithelium, these are several layers of irregular shaped cells. Only the apical layer has columnar cells. Then location, they lie in part of the urethra, large excretory ducts of some glands, such as the esophageal glands, and small areas in the anal mucous membrane, and part of the conjunctiva of the eye. Okay. Then function is of course protection and secretion. And this is an illustration of the uh, stratified columnar epithelium. Okay. But specifically an example of the transitional epithelium. Okay. So we also have to now go through the epithelial surface features, where we talk about the features of the epithelial surface. Okay. So the lateral surface contains adhesion proteins and cell junctions, which we have already tackled. Then the basal surface contains the basal lamina, where we have non-cellular sheets of protein together with reticular fibers, which form a basement membrane. Then we have an apical surface. Okay. Then we talk about the cell surface specialization. It can either be with microvilli, which maximize surface area, which are finger-like extensions of the plasma membrane of apical epithelial cells. Then on moist and mucus secreting epithelium. Then the longest on epithelium, the longest on epithelia that absorb nutrients, for instance in the small intestine, or transport ions such as in the kidneys. Okay, then if not the microvilli, they can also have the cilia. So cilia are whip-like motile extensions of the apical surface membranes. Then they can also have flagella, or flagellum, which is a long isolated cilium only found as sperm in humans. So if you have gotten your cells and their features, then feel free to go check out the anatomy and physiology playlist and select the cells anatomy and physiology lecture. This is where we have talked about cilia, microvilli, and flagella in detail. So this is a picture of the cilium. Okay, then finally we can talk. Okay, so we can talk about glandular cells. Okay, so we can talk about the glandular epithelium. So the glandular epithelium, the function of the glandular epithelium is secretion, which is accomplished by glandular cells that often lie in clusters deep to the covering and lining epithelium. Then you have to know that glands are formed by epithelial cells. So the epithelial cells form glands, and whose main function is where there is production and secretion of needed substances, and they are aqueous or water-based products, and the protein product is made in rough endoplasmic reticulum, packed into the secretory granules by Golgi apparatus, released from the cell by exocytosis. Then a gland may consist of a single cell or a group of cells that secrete substances into ducts or tubules, or onto a surface or into the blood. Then all glands of the body are classified as either endocrine or exocrine. So endocrine or exocrine. Okay, so then you have to know that endocrine glands, which endo means inside, then crine means secretion, enter the interstitial fluid and then diffuse directly into the blood streams without flowing through a duct. So these secretions, called hormones, regulate many metabolic and physiological activities that maintain homeostasis. Then the pituitary, thyroid, and adrenal glands are examples of the endocrine glands. Okay. Then for the exocrine glands, so exo means outside, then crine of course means secretion. They secrete their products into ducts that empty onto the surface of a covering and lining epithelium, such as the skin surface or the lumen of the oral organs. Then the secretions of exocrine glands include mucus, sweat, oil, earwax, saliva, and digestive enzymes. Then examples of exocrine glands include the sudoriferous or sweat glands. We have which produces sweat to help lower body temperature, and saliva glands which secrete saliva. Okay, then if we go into details on the exocrine glands, there are types of classification, which is known as the structural classification over exocrine gland. So this is the structural classification. So structural classification, the exocrine glands can be classified as unicellular or multicellular. So as the name implies, unicellular glands are single-celled. For example, goblet cells are important unicellular exocrine glands that secrete mucus directly onto the apical surface of the lining epithelium. So that's an example. So unicellular cells, example is goblet cells, which are scattered within the epithelial lining of the intestines and respiratory tubules. Then the product is called the mucin. So mucus is mucin and water. Okay. Then the other classification, which is under structural classification, which is multicellular classification, we can classify them as either simple duct structures or compound duct structures. So simple means the branch does not branch out, the duct does not branch out. So we can have simple tubular, for example, the intestinal glands. Then you can also have a simple branched tubular, for example, the stomach or the gastric glands. And then you can also have, so these are tubular secretory structures. Then you also have alveolar secretory structures, such as a simple alveolar, for example. No important example in there's actually no important example in humans. And then the other one is a simple branch alveoli. An example is the sebaceous or oil gland. Okay, then for the compound or duct structures, under tubular secretory structures, we can have a compound tubular. Then example will be duodenal glands of the small intestine. Then under the alveolar secretory structures, we can have a compound alveoli. For example will be a mammary gland. Then another example under the compound will be a compound tubular alveolar. An example will be the salivary glands. Okay, so this is just another illustration of the simple and compound multicellular exocrine glands. Okay, then the other classification, which is functional classification of exocrine glands. So the functional classification of exocrine glands is based on how their secretions are released. So namely, there is a merocrine, apocrine, and orocrine glands. So the functional classification of exocrine glands is based on whether a secretion is a product of a cell or consists of an entire or partial glandular cell. Okay, so for merocrine secretion, as you can see, the secretions are leaving more of a secretory vesicles which are moving out of the cell and serving the secretion. Then for the apocrine secretion, there is a pinched off portion of the cell as the actual secretion. Then for the orocrine secretion, we have cell division, which replaces the lost cell, and the mature cells dies and becomes the secretory product. That's orocrine gland secretion. Okay, so basically that's everything on glands and the epithelial cells. Okay, so if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and hit the bell notification, and see you on the next tutorial.